Dear Sony, what the fuck? You've been sitting on two great sandbox IPs and you out here like Willy Wonka.
You get nothing!
First one being Sunset Overdrive, that kind of came as a bonus in one of your purchases, which I have a video on, and please check that out after this one. But the studio that did Sunset Overdrive is now the one behind the Spider-Man games and the upcoming Wolverine game, so I can live without another Sunset Overdrive game if I'm trading it for those. But the other open world sandbox IP you have is named Infamous, a series I've enjoyed very much. I thought of this series because I heard you say the PS5 is now in the later stage of its life cycle, and no big AAA games are on the horizon this year. So I gotta say to you, what the fuck, Sony? I know, I'm basically an old man yelling at clouds at this point because Sucker Punch, the developer of Infamous, said that they're moving on from the franchise. And since they have been great before Infamous with the Sly Cooper series, and after with Ghost of Tsushima, I have faith that whatever they work on will be a great contribution to gaming. But I still just missed this series and wish it came back. So since you don't seem to have any plans for it in the future, I'm gonna have to go back to the latest entry that released 10 years ago. So let's take a look at Infamous Second Son. Infamous Second Son takes place 7 years after the events of the second game and is a standalone in the series. In this world, there are people with superpowers called conduits, and in one of the endings of the second game, a decision is made to make them all go bye-bye. So now 7 years later, the government established the D.U.P to track down the remaining conduits who have been labeled as bioterrorists. You play as Delsin Rowe. He's a cool-looking hipster graffiti artist from the Akomish Reservation, who loves sticking it to the man, especially when the man is his sheriff brother Reggie, as these two are up to their day-to-day shenanigans in Salmon Bay. Just outside of fictional Seattle, a van carrying conduits crashes, and in a standoff, Delsin comes in contact with one of them and absorbs his powers and gets some of his backstory. After chasing down Hank, we run into the director of the D.U.P and our main antagonist, Augustine, who's a conduit herself with the power of concrete, which sounds lame, but it's okay and actually kind of scary. She starts nagging and being all nosy, wanting to know what happened, but we just became conduits now, so we can't just spill the beans. She starts twisting her arm and threatens Betty from the reservation, who is Delsin's motherly figure. And here's where the first decision of the game has to be made. So there are good karma and bad karma actions throughout the whole series, and depending on what karma you play in the game with, it shapes the outcome of the story, but it also affects the abilities you get. This first decision is really to set the tone. It's the ultimate choice between being a hero and being infamous. It really doesn't matter what you pick here, Augustine still knocks your ass out and tortures the tribe for more information. Delsin wakes up a whole week later and sees that Augustine has left the tribe to die by impaling them with the concrete shards. See, I told you it was scary. He realizes his power is absorbing any power he comes in contact with, like a human Kirby. He just doesn't have to eat him, that'd be f***ed up. He also learns that the tribe can be saved if he had Augustine's power, so now him and Reggie set their sights on Seattle. Along the way, you encounter the survivors from the van crash, attempt to absorb their powers, and try to team up with them against Augustine. The whole game has an X-Men feel to it. There are labeled bioterrorists, and it doesn't matter that you're doing good, the stigma is still really hard to shake off, which creates conflict between the brothers that's so interesting to explore. The good and bad karma is also scored by what you do. Once Seattle really opens up to you, there are blue and red icons on the map showing you the different activities. You could go ahead and stop a drug deal for good karma, or kill some protesters for bad, but there are also simpler things that matter as well. Like in battle, if you kill D.U.P officers is bad karma, or if you choose to subdue them, you get awarded good karma. What you do also affects how the public sees you. They will either yell at you angrily or cheer your name as you pass by. You get awarded the karma, and your level increases, unlocking attacks depending on your level of karma. You upgrade the abilities by collecting shards that are scattered throughout the city in scanners or in drones. Even though I played this once before and I'm very sure I picked the good karma, I still can't bring myself to be the bad guy. I'm just such a puss. The actions and decisions are just so one way or the other. There's really no gray area with the decisions, so it's very easy to commit to one side or the other. This fictional Seattle feels real. It's alive with people and a bunch of businesses open, people driving and walking, and stuff is always going on. There are sections in the city that are dark and depressing, which I love. I know people get depressed by gloomy weather, but I just love the rain. So the ambiance of the city really suits me. and I find it soothing and relaxing in a weird way. But if it doesn't suit you, don't worry. The map is big enough to where they have sections where it doesn't really rain, and it's more sunny if you're that kind of person. Apart from just the rain, the different parts of the city offer fresh and varied settings within the city. So if you are a collector like me, there are a ton of dots on the map to go get and bases to take down. Plus there's stuff you can find like audio logs to expand on Augustine and the D.U.P. As far as rewards go, I do wish there was a bit more customization to Delsin rather than only the jackets you get. It's so minimal, it kind of feels like meh. It would have been cooler if you got a whole set of different clothes, shoes, pants, backpack, beanie, but I guess I'll take it. I'm not really someone who partakes in photo mode in games at all, but this game is one that offers unlimited gorgeous shots for way more talented and creative minds than myself. I can barely take the photos that are asked of me in the missions. What I'm trying to say is the game is really pretty. I don't know if it's because I've been playing older stuff lately, but the level of detail is amazing. The colors are just so vivid. Just take a look at Delsin, for example. He has so much shit on and everything has amazing detail. The beanie, the creases in the sleeves of the jacket, the buttons, the stitching, all of the pins. Then he has a hoodie underneath that, and you can see the zipper and the shirt underneath that. Plus the facial expressions and animation are still fantastic. Character models look really good, resembling the actors Troy Baker as Delsin and Travis Willingham as Reggie. They both play brilliantly off one another, and the sibling rivalry dynamic of them being polar opposites works so well. I give so much credit to the performances. The cutscenes are a bit longer than usual, but the writing is so good that I didn't really mind. It got a few half chuckles out of me. So you can liberate the city from the D.U.P in the different sections by completing side missions like find the secret agent, take down cameras, shut down main power cores, releasing prisoners. And once you do all those from a certain era, you unlock another mission where you must take down a horde of D.U.P officers to reclaim that area, and you unlock the fast travel. Delsin has a chain that he uses for melee attacks, plus he has his powers. The main form of attack with the powers is shooting. Each power has a different fire rate and a bigger shot, plus a whole different set of abilities and traversal that comes along with each power. The very first one you get is smoke. It kind of shoots like a pistol, and you can smoke dash and travel through vents, which looks and feels really cool. There's a more powerful shot you do by holding down the trigger, and each power also has its own special attack called karma bombs. So as you collect a certain amount of whatever karma in a row, you are building up this little meter over here. Once you do, you have the special attack of that power at your disposal. But if you break this streak by collecting the opposite karma, it's lost and you must build it up again. These are really cool and help with the big crowds, and they're different enough from one another that it makes things very interesting. Once you get another power, the story progresses for you to find superconductors that boost the power to unlock the abilities for that power. So now you have two powers, and how you switch between them sounds a bit annoying, but I like the creativity here. So the second power is Neon, which shoots out a beam. You can run faster, jump higher, and run up buildings. You can also freeze enemies in a bubble, and it has its own super attack. So there is kind of ammo for the powers, and how you refill it is the same way you switch them, is by absorbing the element. So for example, Neon, you have to approach these neon signs by pressing the touchpad, and you get the neon. If you want all the smoke again, you have to find a rooftop or blow up a car and make some smoke your own and absorb it that way. What I really liked is how they implemented things in the world that become more and more important. They have been there the whole time. I didn't even notice them until I actually needed them, and especially these antenna dishes that really come in handy later on. So towards the end, when you have most of the powers and you run out of ammo, you have to scramble to see what's at your disposal to absorb and use. The third power is video, which again sounds weird, but is actually kind of awesome. This shoots in a burst and has melee attacks with swords. You can turn invisible as well, and to top it all off, you can fly. So needless to say, there's plenty of ways to attack. The shooting for everything is very smooth and snappy, and the traversal, once everything is fully upgraded, is very fun. The final power, as I mentioned before, is concrete. Wasn't really a huge fan of having to learn this one in the final battle. That just makes it feel more like a tutorial level rather than the final boss. But once mastered, it's okay. It just doesn't feel as awesome as it should be, being the final power. They're ultimately really fun to use. I don't think I hated one over the other. The enemies aren't really affected by certain elements, which I do wish that was implemented somehow. There is an okay amount of enemy types, but having a certain enemy be more susceptible to smoke or taking higher damage for video, stuff like that, that would have kept me a little bit more on my toes. The boss missions are really fun, but other than the last one, there's only really one other one that feels like a real boss fight, but there's actually a reason for that, so I get to pass. The second to final mission is really important, and it's kind of sprung on you a bit, so the pacing towards the end is a tad off. It just feels like you're doing another run-of-the-mill mission and something really important happens. But the lead up to the final fight in the last mission actually does feel epic, having the whole gang you befriended along the way tag along and help you. But what I think I appreciate the most from the game are the controls, because they were trying for innovation with the DualShock 4. The game released a month after the launch for the PlayStation 4, and I'm sure they wanted to show what's possible with the controller. And they did, but I feel like no other games took advantage of the capabilities of the DualShock 4 quite like Second Son did. They incorporated swiping of the pad as the interact button. It works and feels great. That touchpad was completely neglected that whole generation. But the most memorable thing to me were the spray paint activities. This is where you spray stencil art in a ton of spots throughout the city. I've never seen in a game where the game has me hold the controller like that before or since. And without a sensor bar, just the controller, it works out perfectly. I got big old gorilla hands and I'm surprised how comfortable it is to hold the controller to spray that way. There is some feedback to it as well. I just applaud this kind of out of the box thinking, really. But that's just me. I can see how those spray paint activities could annoy some other people, but I'm just still in awe of how the game made me use the controller in a whole different way that I would never thought of using. If you played Second Son, let me know down in the comments on what side you on, spray or no spray. And while you're down there, please hit the subscribe button for me. So if you're no spray, don't worry, there's so much more to do that you can just completely skip them. But if you choose to do it all, it can take you around 16 hours to complete. Of course, you need to do another run as the other side to fully see the game, which would add another 4 hours if you speedrun it. There's also the Paper Trail DLC mission. This was another attempt of them thinking out of the box, where you have to investigate a conduit that manipulates paper. Again, is way cooler than it sounds. And you would collect clues that you would then have to take to a website to collect even more clues and bring them back to the game. But now, you can complete the whole thing on your PlayStation 4. It does get tricky at one part where you have to use an image from the website, but it's nothing a quick Google search can't fix if you want to complete the mission. Cole's Legacy is another DLC that covers the events of the 7-year gap. And the final one, which is considered more of a whole other game, it's called Infamous First Light. You play as Fetch and cover some of her backstory. If you guys like this video, maybe I'll cover that whole thing on its own video. But that's the game. You're free to roam the city collecting powers, doing activities, taking down Augustine and becoming a hero or a villain, all wrapped in a good story about family differences and sticking together. Infamous is a great series that I wish would come back, not only because it's a great series, but because Sucker Punch is such a great studio that it learns and builds on their games. From Infamous 2 to Second Son, there was a 3-year gap, and the growth and innovation between the games is appreciated by me. So imagine what they could do with a 10-year gap. Now, Sony, I understand you have Marvel's Spider-Man, and maybe the games might be too similar in your eyes, but Marvel's Spider-Man came 4 years after Second Son, and no one compared to them then. And what if they're similar? That's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean it won't sell or won't work. If Ubisoft can make Far Cry, then Team Far Cry, then third-person Team Far Cry, then Team Far Cry and City, then Mythology Far Cry, then Assassin's Far Cry, Pirate Far Cry, and finally Pandora Far Cry, I think you would be okay by just having two types of similar games, because they offer completely different things, and I really miss those things, and I wish they would come back. But let me know your thoughts on the Infamous series. Are you glad it's done? Do you miss it like I do? Or is there another franchise you wish Sony brought back? Anything at all, let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and remember to always and forever, you do you. Oh, and I'm just playing, Yubi. You know I love you.